With an incredible speed, a feeling of disgust swept over my entire body, making it stiff and unable to move. Even though I didn't want to hear it, the distinct sound of a woman's voice, typical of a man and woman's intimate actions, kept piercing my ears regularly. No doubt about it, Daniel was cheating on me right now, in our very house. Ugh! The voice beyond the wall was so vivid, and something rose up in my chest. Feeling sick, I almost threw up but managed to suppress it with my hand and swallowed it down. What should I do? What can I do in a situation like this? As tears welled up and I began to panic, suddenly my mother-in-law's words came back to me. If you're ever in trouble, I'll definitely help, just let me know. Showing the scene of her son's infidelity isn't right. But with no parents of my own, I couldn't think of anyone else to turn to. Frantically, I dialed her number from my call history. After a few rings, I heard the familiar voice of my mother-in-law. Harper? I was just... Mother! Your son is in big trouble. What? I interrupted her words and shouted. I am Harper, a 33-year-old part-time housewife. Last year, I married Daniel, my age mate. Daniel works at a well-known local company, a real corporate guy. He's what you'd call an elite. It's a bit awkward to admit, but Daniel picked me up. After work one night, drinking with friends, Daniel and his buddy approached us. Normally, I'd immediately turn down a pickup, but that night, both my friend and I were tipsy and in high spirits. Having a drink together couldn't hurt, I thought, and we ended up joining them. Perhaps helped by the alcohol, Daniel and I hit it off and exchanged contact information. The next day, Daniel contacted me, and things quickly progressed to regular dating. He's well paid, a good talker, and not bad looking either. Experienced with women, his manners are always smooth. At first, I wondered why such a guy was still single at 33. Around here, most people marry in their 20s. It's rare for someone to be unmarried past 30. Maybe Daniel just wasn't interested in marriage at all. Or maybe I was just a fling to him. Despite feeling a bit cloudy, I never asked. About half a year later, Daniel suddenly proposed to me. Caught off guard, I was thrilled. I was so happy that when I responded to him, my true feelings just slipped out. I honestly thought you were not the marrying type, so this is a surprise. But I'm so happy. Daniel, with tears of joy in his eyes, just replied without changing his expression. I was married before, you know. Well, it didn't work out. What? His unexpected response filled my mind with question marks. What do you mean? Huh? Didn't I mention that? As I pressed him for clarity, it turned out that Daniel was actually divorced. Moreover, he had divorced the day before we met. I met you right after I became single, Harper. It felt like fate. No, that's... I have no prejudice against divorcees. After all, compatibility between people is a hit or miss. But honestly, finding out that Daniel approached me the day after his divorce planted seeds of mistrust within me. It's one thing to have a girlfriend, but to switch gears that quickly from being married? Most importantly, until now, I had no idea that Daniel was divorced. That was what really stuck with me. Daniel seemed to take it lightly, but for me, it was a big deal. I wished he had told me such an important thing before we got involved. Maybe it was obvious from my reaction, but Daniel looked annoyed and said, "What's with that face? You're not gonna say you have a problem with divorcees, are you?" "What? Oh, no, it's not that. I'm just a bit shocked, that's all." When I denied it, Daniel's mouth curved into a satisfied grin. "Right. You're the type who knows her place. You're different from her." Daniel nodded to himself. Her. Probably his ex-wife. I don't even know her face or name, yet I felt a sudden rivalry towards her. What kind of person was she? It's pointless to think about it, but I couldn't help but wonder. Anyway, if we're gonna be married, you gotta tell me the important stuff first. I know. Just slipped my mind, that's all. Yeah. With a lingering sense of unease, we got married. But not even a month into our marriage, I would come to regret this decision.
What? Care?
Yeah. My mom, she's sharp as a tack, but she's getting on in years, and now her legs aren't what they used to be. Looks like she'll need caregiving soon. Despite my insistence on being informed about important matters, I had never known that my mother-in-law lived alone because Daniel's father was infertile, nor that she was soon to need care due to her mobility issues. Since meeting Daniel, it's been one surprise after another. If only I had insisted on at least meeting his family face-to-face before we got married. When I said I wanted to greet his family before getting married, Daniel had excused it by saying, "My family's in the next state, and I'm too busy," and settled for a phone call. My parents had passed away early, so there was little need for formalities, and I had readily accepted that. Could it be that Daniel insisted on a phone greeting back then to hide this fact and marry me without coming clean? Such suspicions even crossed my mind.
I work too, and caregiving on weekdays is gonna be tough, I think.
Yeah, it's tough when you're working. Good. Maybe he's not planning to make me take on the caregiving. Though I felt bad for my mother-in-law, my relief was short-lived as Daniel casually suggested.
That's why you could go part-time, Harper? What? Part-time would be more flexible, right? You could quit any time if needed. Look, I'm the one earning the money after all. No worries. What are you talking about?
First, I'm suddenly informed about Camila, and now he's suggesting I switch to part-time. And he says it as if he's making a concession. That's what really made me angry.
Don't make decisions on your own. You never even mentioned her caregiving before. I can understand planning for the future, but telling me to switch to part-time all of a sudden is just troubling.
Well, I earn more than you do. It's not like I can go part-time, right? Can you earn as much as me? His dismissive attitude, as if he was looking down on me, was evident. Sure, Daniel earns a high income. He's probably one of the top earners in our age group. I can't make as much money as he does. But that doesn't mean I have to be at his beck and call. I bit my lip hard.
I told you when we got married, right? To always talk about important things. Whether it's your divorce history or this caregiving issue, you always bring things up at the last minute. Huh?
Daniel seemed surprised by my pushback and glared at me as he clicked his tongue. But I couldn't back down. I felt I wasn't wrong.
I was gonna answer if you asked about the divorce or caregiving. It's your fault for not asking, isn't it? What? Am I supposed to ask, do you have a divorce history? Do your parents need caregiving? Is that it?
Despite my sarcasm, Daniel nodded seriously. Of course. It's your fault for not doing that.
That's ridiculous.
As selfish as it was. Perhaps Daniel had a point. Maybe I should have asked more about his family beforehand. As I remained silent, Daniel looked triumphant. Excuses like "I didn't hear about it at work, why didn't you tell me" won't fly, will they? Well, if you still have something to say, you can tell my mom yourself.
What?
Look, we both have tomorrow off, so I'll take you to my parents' house. You can tell her yourself. She'll be disappointed, though. With that, Daniel walked off to his room.
Talk to my mother-in-law directly.
Could I actually say it? She seemed so calm over the phone. It wouldn't be hard to refuse if she were unpleasant, but if she seemed kind. I might be overwhelmed with guilt. But I have a life too. We've been married less than a month, but I might need to consider divorce depending on how things go. I clenched my fists tightly, deciding to be brave. The next day arrived. Daniel and I drove to his parents' house. About an hour away from ours. When we arrived, I saw it was just a normal house. Daniel strode up and unlocked the door himself, and I followed him inside. "Mom, we're coming in," he called out as he opened the door to the back room. "Oh. Welcome." My mother-in-law, seated on the bed, waved at us with a cheerful smile.
Hello, nice to meet you.
I'm sorry about this. I fell and broke a bone not long ago. Broken bone. It turned out that her injury was why she temporarily needed care. It's so frustrating. I want to walk freely on my own again soon. Hearing this, Daniel turned back to her. What? You can walk on your own? Mom, didn't the doctor suggest a wheelchair? Not at all. They just said because of my age, I might not be able to walk if I don't do rehab. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed Daniel had misunderstood the caregiving situation. Knowing the truth at his parents' house, we went home feeling reassured. Later, I had a chance to talk with her more slowly. She was truly gentle and kind. I hope I'm not causing you too much trouble, Harper. My son, he might have taken after his father, a bit self-centered. For better or worse, he's never really faced failure in his life, so he's overly confident. Indeed, Daniel had always been brimming with confidence since we met. I used to find it attractive, but now I see it as more of a hassle. Did he drag you here today? Are you okay? She genuinely seemed concerned for me. No, I'm fine. Thank you. How are you managing the housework? My sister's family lives nearby, so they help me out when really needed. It might take time, but I can walk if I try hard enough. Seeing her smile shyly, something tightened in my chest. Initially, I was totally against the idea of going part-time for caregiving. Yet here I was, wanting to help her. After discussing it with my workplace, I switched to part-time. I couldn't visit Daniel's parents' house every day, but I made sure to stop by once a week. My mother-in-law was very grateful, repeatedly apologizing, but I simply told her, it's my decision. Perhaps, having lost my own parents early, I saw my own parents in her. In the beginning, Daniel also thanked me, saying, I really appreciate this. Months later, although Camila's fracture had healed, her days of rehabilitation had begun. Harper, it must be hard coming all this way? I'm fine now. My leg is healed, my mother-in-law said, holding back for my sake, yet her walking was still unsteady. Moreover, since she couldn't drive, she would have to use a bus or taxi to get to the hospital. I know it might be meddling, but I'm worried, so please let me keep coming regularly, I insisted.
Harper, thank you.
I visited my mother-in-law about twice a week. During those days, I left prepared meals in the fridge for Daniel, and if I was going to be home late, he would warm them up himself. Again, going to Mom's? I was hoping for a fresh meal today. He would sometimes complain, but I could only reply, I'll try to come home early. After a few months, her rehabilitation progressed well, and she was able to walk almost as before. By this time, I had also grown close to her sister's family, who lived nearby, and we all rejoiced at her recovery.
It's all thanks to you, Harper. Really, thank you. If you ever need help, just let me know. Thank you. Please let me come and visit again.
My mother-in-law's sister, Camila, praised me so much it was almost embarrassing, saying, Daniel really got himself a wonderful wife. Perhaps I had let my guard down because my mother-in-law's rehabilitation had finished. One day at work, I suddenly felt a severe dizziness. The room seemed to distort, and my head spun. I really wanted to push through until the end of my shift, but it seemed unbearable. After talking to my boss, I was allowed to leave early. I needed to lie down as soon as possible. Staggering, I managed to make it home. Upon opening the front door and barely managing to take off my shoes, my eyes widened. There, lined up, were Daniel's work shoes and a pair of women's shoes I had never seen before. In my dizzy head, the thought of infidelity immediately surfaced. I quietly tiptoed from the entrance to the living room. Though I hesitated, the living room was empty. However, from the bedroom at the back, I could hear some noises. As I approached the door on tiptoe, I didn't even need to open it to know what was happening inside. An intense disgust surged through me, my body stiffened, and I couldn't move. Despite not wanting to hear, the distinctive sound of a woman's voice during intimate acts kept invading my ears regularly. Without a doubt, Daniel was cheating on me, right here, right now, in our own home.
Ugh.
The voices from beyond the wall were so vivid, something welled up from my chest. Feeling sick and coupled with my ill health, I nearly vomited but managed to suppress it with my hand and swallowed it down. What should I do? What can I do in such a situation? As tears formed and I began to panic, suddenly my mother-in-law's words came back to me.
If you ever have trouble, I'll definitely help you, just let me know.
Showing the scene of her son's infidelity isn't right. But with no parents of my own, I couldn't think of anyone else to turn to. I managed to make it back to the entrance and, with trembling hands, I pulled out my smartphone and frantically dialed her from my call history. After a few rings, I heard the familiar voice of my mother-in-law.
Harper? I was just... Mother! Your son is in big trouble. What?
I interrupted her words and shouted. After that, while intermittently breaking up, I somehow managed to explain the situation. She kindly responded, trying to calm me down.
What an idiot, that stupid son of mine.
After I finished explaining everything, she sighed deeply on the other end of the phone.
Mom, I'm sorry for calling like this all of a sudden.
I just don't know what to do.
It's okay, Harper, I'm coming right now. Please wait for me.
Yes. After hanging up, I gradually calmed down. Being able to talk to her might have helped. She said she was coming right away, but she can't drive. Even if someone from her sister's family drove her, it would take an hour from her house to ours. I have no guarantee that Daniel and his affair partner will still be here when my mother-in-law arrives. Even if they stayed until my mother-in-law arrived, by then, everything might be over and they could act as if nothing had happened. If it's just having tea at home, they could say, and that would be the end of it. Without evidence, they could easily talk their way out of it.
Then, I need to gather evidence now.
Right now, they are in the midst of their affair. They couldn't possibly dream that I would come home early from work. Being off guard, it should be easier to gather evidence.
Okay, let's do this.
I took a couple of deep breaths and ventured back toward the living room. Just like before, as I approached the bedroom door, I could hear vivid voices. Perhaps because I was mentally prepared, I felt disgusted and uncomfortable, but I wasn't as shaken as before. Carefully, I started recording on my smartphone. The affair partner's voice was loud, so I was confident that the recording was going well. However, this might still be weak evidence of infidelity. I wanted something more conclusive. Should I quietly open the door? No, that would surely alert them. If they noticed, it would be over. The risk was too high. As I pondered what to do next, I noticed a smartphone lying carelessly on the living room table. It was Daniel's smartphone. It was carelessly left out. I quietly picked up the phone without making a noise.
The password, oh. Of course.
Daniel often didn't set a lock on his phone while at home because he found entering the password bothersome. Sure enough, it wasn't locked now.
Does he really think I'd never check his phone?
Since he hadn't even locked his phone, it seemed he never suspected I would doubt his fidelity. Can someone really be this unprotected with their smartphone while cheating? Could it be that he felt secure in my trust, or did he think so little of me that he believed he wouldn't get caught? I couldn't know what Daniel was thinking. But now, I could look into his phone. I feel a bit guilty, but just a quick check. I examined the messaging app and call history. There it was, name after name, Ellie. Ellie. Was this the name of the woman he was cheating with? In the messaging app, there were numerous exchanges between Daniel and Ellie that clearly indicated they were meeting up. I scrolled through their conversation and recorded it with my phone.
There, that should do it.
After focusing and finishing my check of the phone, I put it back on the table just as the voices behind the door ceased. A surge of tension ran through me.
No way!
If their act was over, one or both of them might come out. I tried to hide, but it was too late.
What? Harper? Why are you here?
Daniel emerged, completely naked, and spotted me. He stood there, gaping at me. Following him, a woman's stretched voice came out as she peeked around him.
Ah, I wish we could have stayed in bed a bit longer. Idiot! Ellie! Just go back inside.
While Daniel tried to push the woman back into the room silently, the woman called Ellie instead pushed forward eagerly.
What's the matter, Daniel? Go to the bathroom already. I need to go too.
She said in a cajoling voice, then turned, saw me, and gasped. Oh. Could you be the current wife?
And you are, who exactly?
Ignoring her question, I asked coldly, and Ellie narrowed her eyes with a smirk. I'm Ellie, Daniel's ex-wife. Despite being in her underwear, Ellie showed no embarrassment. Knowing that I must be Daniel's wife, she looked at me with a challenging expression, almost like a declaration of war. Was this really Daniel's ex-wife? Glancing at Daniel, he stood there, just in his underwear, looking defeated.
Ellie, just stop. Don't make this any more complicated. And, Harper, wait. There's an explanation for this. It's not what it looks like.
What possible explanation could there be for coming out of the same room naked with your ex-wife during work hours? Enlighten me?
Well.
Daniel's eyes darted around nervously.
What's the matter? Hurry up and explain. It's not infidelity, right? There's a valid reason, right? Well, if you say valid, I'm kind of at a loss here.
As Daniel hesitated, Ellie's voice echoed from behind him. Scary wife. Come on, it's just cheating.
What? That's not okay at all.
Was this defiance? As I grimaced in disbelief, Ellie laughed cheerfully. Come on, it's not serious, right? If it's just cheating, he'll come back to you eventually. Isn't that good enough? So, to put it another way, he feels free to cheat as much as he likes, and then he can just waltz back to the safety of his wife at the end.
That's disgusting, infuriating, and not okay at all.
Disgusting? Ellie tilted her head, posing the question. She appeared older than us, but how old was she, exactly?
It is disgusting. Even now, hearing your unwanted voices made me feel like vomiting. What? Harper, you were back that early? Why didn't you say something? That's sneaky. Sneaky.
Daniel was frantic and clearly flustered. While both seemed to lack common sense, unlike Ellie's brazen attitude, Daniel seemed aware that he had done something terrible. His mouth opened and closed as he searched his mind for an excuse or something to counterattack. Though it was futile to even try. After all, committing adultery at home is just outrageous. Moreover, I had caught him in the act, and he hadn't even apologized. There was only one path left for me to choose.
I want a divorce. What? Why? Why do you think we shouldn't get a divorce? I've had enough, please just spare me.
As I sighed with my statement, Daniel glared at me fiercely.
What is that supposed to mean, just a part-time housewife? Who do you think allows you to live so comfortably?
In a near frenzy, he screamed and suddenly raised his arm. This is bad. He's going to hit me. I braced for the impending blow, but before it could land, the living room door burst open. It was my mother-in-law and Camila's family.
Daniel, what were you about to do? Tell me now. You idiot son.
Daniel yelped and fell to his knees.
Mom? And why are my aunt and her family here too? We heard you were acting like a wild monkey at home. Oh, how shameful.
Camila yelled, and her children nodded in agreement. Seeing Camila, Daniel's face turned pale. Despite his pallor, Daniel was sweating slightly on his forehead. He seemed extremely agitated. Sitting on the floor, he seemed to be trying to escape from Camila, but she had a firm grip on the back of his neck.
You've always had a way with women, haven't you? Aunt. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Despite always appearing arrogant and confident in front of others, Daniel seemed to shrink and curl up like a pill bug in front of Camila. Even Ellie appeared to be frightened. Was Camila really that scary? Sure, she was straightforward, but in the months I had been meeting her, I had never found her to be scary. I was puzzled but soon understood why.
I'll tell your husband about this. You better start looking for another job soon.
Daniel's face turned pale at Camila's words.
No, Aunt. Please wait. I'm begging you.
His face grew even wider as he panicked. For some reason, he started apologizing to Camila, begging for forgiveness.
That place is my calling. Please, give me a break.
What was happening? As I watched Daniel, half in tears, my mother-in-law quietly whispered in my ear.
Actually, my sister's husband is the CEO of Daniel's company. What?
I was so shocked my voice cracked. Daniel, who had always been so full of himself, was actually hired through connections.
He's good outwardly, but not so smart. He somehow graduated from college but couldn't secure a job offer from other companies.
It seemed that Camila's husband had picked him up when he was in trouble. And here he was, boasting about his high income, yet he was a connection hire. I was taken aback and shocked myself when Daniel staggered over and spoke to me.
Harper, things have gotten really bad. Aunt won't forgive me. Well, you reap what you sow, don't you? If things continue this way, best case, I'm demoted. Or even fired. If I get fired at my age, I'll never get into another decent company.
More important than his age would be Daniel's skills and character. But I just listened silently as he spoke.
So here's the thing. I have a proposal.
A proposal? When I asked him to clarify, Daniel nodded satisfactorily.
Somehow, Aunt likes you. So, you should ask her, and she'll let me stay at the company.
He declared it as if it were a brilliant idea, which only confused me more.
Why should I? Spouses support each other, right? Don't worry, I'll also look for a job. I'll find one soon. No, that's not the point.
His suggestion was utterly misguided. How can he be so selfish? I took a deep breath and firmly told Daniel.
Daniel and I are divorcing, and soon we'll be strangers. You say that spouses should support each other, but I have no intention whatsoever of spending my life with you any longer. No. But. Look, you loved me, right? That's why you even took care of my mom, isn't it?
What a poor loser. He was giving me a pleading smile, clinging to nonsense.
I just wanted to help my mother-in-law. I guess I saw my own parents in her. Harper.
I wanted to be a support to my kind mother-in-law. I wanted to give back for what I couldn't do for my own parents.
Mom, even after I divorced Daniel, let's have tea together again. Yes, of course.
My mother-in-law smiled warmly. Meanwhile, Daniel was acting suspicious and anxious.
Harper!
You are better suited to Ellie. Look, you sneak off from work to be with her, why not just get back together? Good luck to both of you.
No! I won't accept that. Ellie is fine for fun, but from my previous marriage, I know she's not suited for marriage. I will follow Harper wherever she goes.
Daniel was making what sounded like a stalking declaration. I was prepared to consult the police when an unfamiliar man grabbed Daniel by the shoulder.
Pathetic, Daniel. What? Dad?
The man was apparently Daniel's father. I hadn't met him before, so I was unaware.
I was supposed to be home temporarily today. I was doing some work at the company, but your mom told me to come here quickly, so I rushed over.
Daniel seemed to shrink even smaller.
You know what you need to do, right? Daniel. Yes. Harper, I'm sorry.
Daniel was then taken by his father to the back room, and Ellie was being lectured by my mother-in-law. Afterwards, I successfully divorced Daniel. It was all thanks to my mother-in-law and her sister's family. Daniel signed everything as told, completely subdued. I also got a substantial amount in alimony. It came all at once from Daniel's savings, covering both his and Ellie's parts. He objected, of course, but once again, my mother-in-law and her sister's family supported me. The amount was surprisingly large, and when I consulted with my mother-in-law, she advised, he deserved it. Just take it. Daniel, having lost most of his savings, was told by his parents they would manage his finances from now on since having money only led him to trouble. He was fired from his job and reluctantly started working part-time, struggling with the change from his previous employment. Meanwhile, Ellie was diligently working as a cashier at a supermarket. However, since Daniel was covering the alimony she owed, her life was quite tough. Ellie, known for her lavish spending, recently couldn't buy anything and appeared to have aged significantly. Turns out, her reckless spending was the original cause of their divorce. I pleaded with my company and am now working there as a full-time employee. I've also resumed living alone. Though Daniel and I are divorced, I still meet regularly with my mother-in-law and her sister's family. I'm a divorcee with no lingering feelings for Daniel, but I am grateful that I met my mother-in-law and her sister's family. Maybe it's time to start calling her by her first name, now that she's not my mother-in-law. That's what I've been thinking about these days. My first impression upon seeing my sister-in-law for the first time was that she was an extremely charming person with striking features.
Nice to meet you, my name is Catherine. I'm here to say.
But just when I thought I wanted to get along with her, that feeling quickly faded in the next moment. Who's this old lady? Is she my bro's wife's mom? The atmosphere became tense when my sister-in-law not only interrupted my greeting but also referred to me as an old lady. From this day, my hellish days began. My name is Catherine Johnson. I'm just an ordinary 30-year-old housewife. 4 years ago, I was a career woman, totally engrossed in my job. Not to brag, but I was quite popular at the office. I achieved many accomplishments and was admired by my subordinates, superiors, and clients alike. My husband, Bob, was one of them. Bob and I would often meet since we dealt with each other's companies. The start of our friendship was at a party with Bob's company when he initiated a conversation with me. It seems my reputation had reached Bob's company too. According to Bob, he wanted to see for himself if the rumors about me were true, so he decided to join the business meeting with me. At first, he was skeptical, but as we worked together, he fell in love with my strong core and way of life. He felt that I was the only one for him. When I heard that he was determined to make me fall for him, I thought it was cute, like something a high schooler would do. As for me, I had been smitten from the very beginning. You see, Bob had such striking features and was incredibly popular among women. Embarrassingly, Bob was just my type, so I had a secret crush on him. We were business partners, so I kept a certain distance. However, after Bob asked me out on numerous dates, we dated for a year and then got married. Our married life was smooth, and every day was blissful. Every morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Bob would wake up. With a gentle look on his face, he'd say, "Good morning," and give me a warm hug. It became our daily routine. Despite being older, his childlike behavior always tickled my maternal instincts. Furthermore, Bob and I have never had an argument. And why would we? Bob never gets mad. When I accidentally broke a plate he cherished, he was more concerned about me than the plate. I always think about how kind he truly is. Both of us wanted a child, so after getting married, I decided to quit my job to focus on starting a family. Any child of Bob and me is bound to be adorable. I constantly thought about names, especially if it was a girl. Time flew by, and this year marks our 3rd anniversary. We haven't been blessed with a child, but we were still happy. Except for one thing. Bob's family home housed his mother and younger sister. His father passed away from cancer before we got married. His mother is always cheerful and has been very kind to me. I believe Bob's kindness comes from his mother. However, his sister was different. I really didn't like her. Thinking back, it started from the time I first introduced myself before we got married. My first impression of her was that she was a very charming person with striking features, just like Bob. I had briefly thought I wanted to get along with her, but that feeling vanished in the next instant.
Nice to meet you, my name is Catherine. I'm here to say.
Who's this old lady? Is she my bro's wife's mom? Not only did she cut off my greeting, but the atmosphere went cold in an instant when my sister-in-law called me an old lady. My sister-in-law didn't greet me back, so Bob stepped in to introduce me. With a sarcastic tone and looking directly at me, she feigned surprise and asked, "How old are you?" I replied, 27.
No way, seriously? That's hilarious. I thought you were like 50. You really look old.
That was way out of line. I genuinely doubted if this girl was Bob's sister. She blatantly stared at me from head to toe, sizing me up. I just watched her in silence until she furrowed her brow. Whether she disliked my face or my attitude, I couldn't tell, but she kept making snide remarks about my appearance. "Your clothes are so out of style, you're overweight, your nails are unkempt." And more. After a while, I just stared down at my own feet. Bob's hands trembled with rage, while his sister laughed continuously. Then, Bob snapped. Something he rarely does.
"Hey, what the hell are you saying? That's extremely rude."
She responded with, "Ugh, what? You're so annoying." Totally killed the mood. She's just plain nasty. And she would make these same types of snide comments to Bob and their mother. They had put up with her behavior for years without expecting any change in her attitude. Both Bob and his mother apologized to me later. They weren't at fault, so why were they apologizing? I felt sorry for them, but at the same time, I harbored anger towards the sister-in-law for making such remarks to her own family. To minimize contact, I decided not to visit Bob's family home anymore. I heard about the sister-in-law through their mother, but she never caused any harm to us, so I went on living my life peacefully. Then, one day, an incident shattered my happy daily life.
"Catherine, Bob, I have a favor to ask. I'm planning to move to a senior housing facility with assistance in 6 months. Can I stay with you until then?"
Bob's mother had injured her back. No surprise there. It's clear that the sister-in-law is to blame. Their mother already had a frail back and had trouble even carrying groceries. Yet, the sister-in-law who lived with her wouldn't lift a finger to help and would even make her mother carry her shopping bags. That's the level of her selfishness. It's inevitable that the mother's health would deteriorate. I just can't understand why the mother doesn't just kick her out of the house. Is it because she's her daughter? Maybe, no matter how bad the child is, a mother's love knows no bounds. I'm all for living with the mother. But that's only if it's just her. If we live with her, it means the sister-in-law comes with the package. Accepting it was the last thing I wanted. But, I was concerned about the mother's health, so I felt I had no choice but to accept the sister-in-law moving in too. Just as I had expected, living together was hell. From morning to night, the sister-in-law would only spew venom. Especially at me. When I cooked, she'd comment, "This tastes so bad. How can you even make such trash? You're weirdly talented." And then she'd ruthlessly throw the food in the trash. Whenever I folded her clothes, she would always find something to complain about. Sometimes she'd even say things like,
"You need to iron this properly."
Her attitude was like a rebellious teenager. In fact, she never even mentioned anything about how I folded clothes or ironed them. The sister-in-law has a habit of twisting words to fit her narrative. When cleaning the room, I have to be thorough, especially in the corners. Otherwise, the sharp-tongued comments from my sister-in-law start.
"Hey! There's still dust over there. You know, you're pretty much the maid here, so do it right. You're so useless."
Even though my sister-in-law doesn't lift a finger, she's quick to point out any flaws. I silently wonder when I'll escape this hell. As I continued cleaning, she added,
"Poor Bob. You can't even manage household chores, so the least you can do is have a child. I wonder why you were even born a woman. Excuse me? What's your problem?
I couldn't let that comment slide. I'd always held my tongue, but this was too much. But I didn't say anything more. Or rather, I couldn't. The look on my sister-in-law's face was terrifying, as if she was looking at something filthy. The pressure was so intense I couldn't help but look down. It was frightening. It was infuriating. All these feelings were swirling inside me, and all I could do was hold back the tears. Then my sister-in-law left the room, laughing smugly. One day, my sister-in-law came home in a great mood. When my mother-in-law asked why, my sister-in-law eagerly began to brag. Apparently, her boyfriend had proposed. She boasted that he's tall, handsome, and earns a high income. She immediately approached me and brought up my inability to have children.
Well, I'm on top of the world. Losers like you should fulfill their roles as women by having kids.
She laughed at me with that familiar, mocking tone. It was shocking. She didn't have to say that in front of Bob and my mother-in-law. Bob got angry at my sister-in-law's comments, but she wouldn't listen. Suddenly, I felt nauseous. With tears in my eyes, I rushed to the bathroom. From behind, I heard her say, "Pathetic." But I felt so sick that I didn't care. From the living room, I could hear Bob and my sister-in-law arguing. My mother-in-law was beside me, patting my back, and said, "Children are a blessing. It's up to you and Bob to decide the pace." She comforted me with tears in her eyes. I wished from the bottom of my heart that my sister-in-law would get married and leave as soon as possible. On another day, after a routine visit to the OB/GYN, I decided to take a detour on my way home. There was a popular flower shop nearby that was always bustling. I was thinking about buying some flowers when an old colleague, Steve, called out to me. Even though I've left my old job, Steve still looks up to me. We occasionally chat on text, discussing work matters. It's been 3 years since we last met. We chatted for a bit, and he told me he's gonna marry his girlfriend soon. They have a date planned later that day. I was curious about why Steve was at the flower shop, but it soon became clear. Seeing Steve talk so happily about his girlfriend made me smile too. Realizing it was time to go, Steve picked out his flowers and went to pay. While waiting, I browsed the flowers, deciding which to buy. When Steve returned, he had 2 bouquets in his hands. He handed one to me as a gift.
"This is for you. It's baby's breath. The flower's meaning is gratitude and happiness. I've always been grateful for you, Catherine. Please continue to be there for me." Saying that, Steve headed toward the train station. Gratitude and happiness, huh? Never having chosen flowers based on their meaning, I thought Steve was a warm-hearted person. I hurried home. I wanted to tell my husband about today's events as soon as possible. When I got home, my sister-in-law wasn't there. It seems she had gone out. I placed the baby's breath in a vase and prepared dinner with my mother-in-law. It felt peaceful and joyful to have some time just the 3 of us after so long. With my sister-in-law gone, my mother-in-law was watching her favorite TV show that starts every day at 7 p.m. That night, I told my husband about the day's happenings, and we both went to bed with smiles on our faces. The next day, my sister-in-law came home in the morning. She had a bouquet of roses in her hand, which she suddenly threw at me. She said, "Put these in a vase," and then went to her room. I tried to put the thrown bouquet into a vase, but most of the flowers were broken or the petals were torn, so they ended up in the trash. I wondered how roughly she had handled them. I began to feel sorry for my sister-in-law's boyfriend. On closer inspection, I recognized the wrapping of the bouquet. After changing into her house clothes, my sister-in-law started talking again. "Hey, I'm bringing my boyfriend over this Saturday. Make sure you dress decently, okay? Honestly, I wouldn't even want him to see you in your usual tacky outfits." Her words irked me, but the thought that my time with her would be short brought some relief.
On the appointed day, Bob and I were out shopping because my sister-in-law had asked us to. My mother-in-law texted to say that my sister-in-law's fiancé had arrived in our absence. She probably didn't want me meeting her fiancé. When we returned, the living room was bustling. When I went to greet them, my sister-in-law glaringly looked at me. I accidentally made eye contact with the fiancé. After a brief mutual gaze, my sister-in-law, seemingly disliking it, said,
"Don't just stand there. The tea's gotten cold, go get a fresh one."
Her fiancé tried to help, but she stopped him. My mother-in-law mentioned the beautiful roses and baby's breath in the vase, to which my sister-in-law made a snide remark.
"Why is your flower and the one I got from my boyfriend in the same vase? It's awful. Separate them or throw them out. Your flower is colorless and not cute at all."
She took the baby's breath from the vase and dropped it onto the floor. As I served the refreshed tea and placed the baby's breath in another vase, my sister-in-law's taunts continued. Apparently annoyed by my silence, she deliberately spilled the tea I had poured, staining the floor. The floor we had just cleaned with my mother-in-law that morning was now stained brown. From my viewpoint, I could see my sister-in-law's nervous fidgeting. She looked quite agitated. Bob brought a cloth and helped me wipe the floor.
"Bob, you don't have to get dirty for her. Come on, let's sit and chat."
The atmosphere was tense. Did my sister-in-law not realize that her words were backfiring on her? Her fiancé, who had been observing the situation, tried to defend me with his words. But, of course, my sister-in-law wasn't having any of it.
"Why are you defending her? You should only be looking at me,"
she exclaimed, past the point of no return.
"Isn't she your sister?"
her fiancé asked, seeking clarification. In response, my sister-in-law uttered her usual demeaning phrase.
"Nah, she's just the maid here. So it's okay."
My mother-in-law tried to silence my sister-in-law, but as expected, it was to no avail. She just went on and on with her usual nasty comments. Once she was done ranting with a satisfied look on her face, her fiancé looked straight at her and said something.
"Let's break up."
"What?" Steve was livid. No wonder, after all, he was the Steve. I kind of guessed that my sister-in-law was engaged to Steve. The bouquet of roses my sister-in-law brought home was the same one Steve had bought just the other day.
"Catherine is a senior colleague at my workplace, someone I respect and who's kinder than anyone else. And about that baby's breath flower you said wasn't cute, I sent it to Catherine. Sorry for my bad taste." "Wait a minute, I had no idea you two worked together."
My gleeful sister-in-law began to panic.
"Just because you didn't know, you think you can mock him? I've always heard about you being so mean, but Catherine isn't like that."
Steve's gaze was cold. My mother-in-law looked down, while my husband stood by my side, glaring at my sister-in-law. Everyone in the room looked utterly disappointed in my sister-in-law. Seeing this, my sister-in-law looked at me with wide eyes, begging for support.
"This isn't a joke, right? Tell me it's not."
She pulled on my collar so hard it stretched my shirt. I firmly shook off my sister-in-law's hand.
"I've always put up with your snide remarks. After all you've done, don't come to me for help now."
For the first time, I laid bare my emotions towards my sister-in-law.
"You've got to be kidding me. You can't do anything right. You can't even have kids, you're finished as a woman."
As my sister-in-law tried to slap me, Bob stepped in and grabbed her hand. Bob, who had remained silent till now, grabbed a cup of tea and poured it over my sister-in-law's head in anger. He then shouted at her in a low, booming voice. Bob began to recount the truth about our struggles to conceive. It wasn't me who couldn't have children, it was Bob himself. Bob had male infertility. After diligent treatment, it was cured. And now, I was carrying our baby. Furious at my sister-in-law's comment, Bob shouted at her to apologize immediately. Seeing her brother truly angry for the first time, my sister-in-law was so startled she fell on her butt.
"What's going on? Mom, you're on my side, right?"
My sister-in-law tightly grasped my mother-in-law's hand, clinging to her leg in a comical manner. But she was shrugged off.
I'm done with you. I've let a lot slide because you're my daughter, but I've reached my limit. Leave this house now. You're the worst daughter. You ungrateful brat.
My sister-in-law, thinking her mother was her last ally, was abandoned by even her. Clearly, even she was taken aback by this. She ran to her room, crying. Steve said he would contact us later and left the house. My mother-in-law hugged me and said,
You endured so much, you did well.
While patting my head. My mother-in-law, hearing for the first time that I was pregnant, cried with a smile saying,
Why didn't you tell me sooner? Congratulations.
Bob apologized for not protecting me properly. It was a tumultuous few minutes, but I felt refreshed having finally expressed my feelings to my sister-in-law. I'll never forget what happened today. Later, my mother-in-law moved to a senior living community, and the family home was sold. Bob and I decided to move closer to my mother-in-law. We wanted her to watch our child grow up. I haven't heard anything about my sister-in-law since. After that, Bob dragged his reclusive sister out of the room and forcefully threw her out of the house, belongings and all. No one has been in touch with the sister-in-law, so nobody knows where she is or what she's up to. I got a message from Steve via text that he had sent a letter and some flowers. A bouquet of baby's breath had just arrived in the mail. I put the bouquet of baby's breath into a vase and started reading the letter.
Catherine, I'm so sorry for my late response. How have you been feeling? Congratulations on your pregnancy. It was such unexpected happy news that it even made me happy.
The letter went on to discuss his relationship with the sister-in-law after that incident. It seems that Steve and the sister-in-law had met once after the event. This was because it later came to light that the sister-in-law had been two-timing. Steve found out when the other man she was seeing contacted him. Since then, he's cut ties and they're no longer in touch. If they had gotten married, he would have surely regretted it. The letter was filled with his gratitude. I should be the one thanking Steve, but he really is a sincere young man. I truly hope he finds happiness. The end of my sister-in-law, who bullied me relentlessly, was unexpected. Through these events, I realized how one's actions, good or bad, come back to oneself based on how you treat others. I hope my child will be filled with compassion and understanding. End of the call. Hello? You can come over. I noticed the video call hadn't ended completely. As I tried to end it, my husband was making a call to someone. I found his overly familiar demeanor puzzling. Peeking with my in-laws, I witnessed an unexpected move by my husband. My name is Catherine Johnson. I'm a 36-year-old housewife. Currently, I live with my in-laws and our 3 children. My husband was assigned overseas for 3 years, and I was apprehensive about raising the children alone during this period. I worried about potential illnesses or injuries. After discussing my concerns with my husband, we decided to move in with my in-laws. My husband, Bob, and I have been classmates, dating since high school. I've known my in-laws since then. We decided to marry once we were financially stable after graduating from college, and we got married when I was 24. Bob wanted to support the family soon, so he joined a large company. He was ambitious and was highly regarded even though he had just started. Therefore, we were able to get married sooner than planned. Both our parents looked forward to our wedding. They were delighted at our ceremony. Both families got along well, having interactions even before our marriage, feeling just like one big family. Both parents were very pleased with our wedding, and whenever I remember the ceremony, it brings back happy memories. On my side, aside from my parents, I have an older brother, 3 years my senior. He lives far away, and we occasionally meet. He sees Bob as a real younger brother, and they've been close since school. They both played sports in school and even enjoy watching games together. When our children were born, he was thrilled, always bringing gifts. Such a caring brother. However, tragedy struck when our parents passed away in an accident shortly after our first child was born. The last time I saw them, they were gleaming with joy, eagerly waiting to see their grandchild grow. Their faces, full of hope for the future and believing in continued happiness, is my last memory of them. I had always looked forward to doing things with my parents and my newborn child. But, just as they were in such high spirits, they were taken from me suddenly in an accident. Preparing for their funeral with my older brother, I was so shocked that I felt numb for quite a while. While preparing for the funeral with my brother, I was in shock for a while. My memories of that period are blurry. During the funeral, I was naturally overwhelmed by a sense of loss. I remember weeping quietly, with tears streaming down my face non-stop. My brother desperately tried to comfort me as I grieved deeply, but I felt like I wasn't truly present. Even after the funeral, it was my husband, Bob, who supported me. Even though Bob was close with my parents and grieved their loss, and despite his busy work schedule and taking care of our child, he was there for me. Seeing how Bob handled everything, I realized I couldn't stay like this and began to slowly recover. When I apologized for the burden I had placed on him during that time, Bob just laughed.
Couples are there to support each other during tough times. It's a given for me to be there for you, Catherine. It's only natural to put on a brave face for our family, even if it's hard,"
said Bob. Inspired by Bob's attitude, I vowed to do my best for our family. My in-laws, knowing how devastated I was during that period, became even more concerned about me.
"Catherine, we consider you our very own daughter. Please, don't hesitate to rely on us. We're here to help and support you anytime,"
they would tell me. Knowing them, I was reassured that living together would be worry-free. So, we canceled our apartment contract, completed the necessary paperwork to transfer our child's preschool, and moved into my in-laws' home. Our kids are attached to their grandparents, so we changed preschools for them to live together, but they didn't seem to mind. The house is a 2-story owned property that Bob had built when he was young. It was designed to be child-friendly and to be their residence in their old age, with attention to accessibility, making it a safe home for small children. The house is slightly bigger than our previous apartment, and given our young kids, moving in didn't pose any problems. Our old apartment wasn't 2-story, so initially, the kids found the stairs fascinating and often played on them together. I was concerned about how the change in environment might affect them, but seeing them play so energetically eased my worries. Even though they had to switch preschools, they seemed to adjust well and made new friends quickly. Though I was anxious they might fall ill from the changes, they've been healthy, which puts me at ease. Ever since we moved to New York, we've been living harmoniously with my in-laws, supporting one another. At first, since I was a stay-at-home mom, I intended to handle all the household chores. However, my in-laws proposed we share the responsibilities. While I took care of preparing meals, my mother-in-law did the laundry, though sometimes we'd switch roles. Apparently, she's not great at cooking, so she was relieved, and she even complimented my dishes. The house cleaning was shared between my in-laws and me, freeing up more of my time. I now get to spend more time with my kids, and I believe I've become more attuned to their subtle changes. The only issue, if it can be called that, is the kids missing their playtime with Bob. They adore him, and whenever he had time, he used to dote on them a lot. Despite his tiring job, Bob would sometimes tell me to take a break and handle some chores. He works hard, both at his job and with the kids, so much that I sometimes worried if he was resting enough.
"Even though you work and handle house chores, are you sure you're getting enough rest?"
When I asked Bob this, he assured me he was fine. Bob is gentle, family-oriented, and has a bright and cheerful demeanor. Being overseas, it's not so easy to travel back and forth, and in the span of 3 years, he only came back to the States once. Video calls with Bob while he's on his overseas assignment are something my kids and I really look forward to. With a 14-hour time difference, finding a common time can be tricky, but we try to video call at least once a month. We also exchange emails regularly, but nothing beats seeing each other's faces. We're always curious about his life abroad and want to ensure he's okay. Recently, the kids have grown more interested in the glimpses of foreign settings and Bob's stories during these calls. Today at 9 p.m., we're scheduled for a video call with Bob. The kids, eager to talk to their father, have even taken naps to ensure they stay awake. As I set up the computer for the call, the kids line up properly and soon start a lively conversation with Bob.
Been a while, how've you been?
When Bob's face appeared on the screen and I called out to him, the kids responded with joyous voices.
Hey, Dad. We're doing good. Guess what?
They began, animatedly using their hands to emphasize their points. Bob listened with a delighted expression. I had so much I wanted to discuss with Bob, but I decided to wait until the kids were asleep. My in-laws and I watched the conversation with warm smiles. Bob mentioned he had work later, but it sounded like he had about 2 hours to spare. After the kids, I was hoping to have some one-on-one time with my husband. Thanks to the consistent help from my in-laws, there were things difficult to discuss or issues I had been facing that I really wanted to share with Bob. About 30 minutes into the video call, perhaps because of their energetic chatter, the kids began to look sleepy. Even though they had taken a nap, it was around their usual bedtime, so they were likely tired. Yet, they seemed to still have more to say and were trying their best to stay awake. The youngest is mostly asleep, occasionally jolting awake, but quickly succumbing to drowsiness again. Seeing them in such a state, Bob gently suggested they go to bed. Getting sleepy, huh? Just 1 more month and Dad'll be coming back to New York. We'll chat loads then. Bob's overseas assignment was coming to an end in a month. The kids were eagerly awaiting his return, but they still seemed to have so much to say. Remember, you have school and preschool tomorrow. Let's call it a night. My in-laws and I also persuaded the kids, and soon they were off to bed. As the drowsy kids waved goodbye, Bob waved back. As I stood to take the kids to their rooms, my in-laws quietly offered. You two probably have a lot to talk about. Leave the kids with us and take your time. Holding our youngest, who had fallen asleep, my in-laws walked the other kids to their room by the hand. Grateful for my mother-in-law's words, I settled in to chat with Bob. Even in just a month, it's easy to notice how much kids grow. When it came to talking about the kids, the topics were endless.
At the parent-teacher conference, they seemed to be having a great time. When the teacher asked them a question, they answered confidently. They proudly told me all about it afterwards. It was adorable. Ever since our eldest started elementary school, with Bob being overseas, he's always looked forward to attending those conferences. I've been sending pictures regularly, but he always wants a detailed account during our calls. Seeing how much Bob values our family and takes joy in the kids' milestones always reminds me of how fortunate I am to have married such a wonderful man, and I cherish our current happiness. Besides updates about the kids, we also discussed some challenges, concerns, and future plans. After a while, my in-laws joined back in our conversation. Before we knew it, it was midnight. Bob had work to start, and we had an early day ahead, so we wrapped up the call. Good night. You have work now, so take care, I said. Intending to end the call, I mistakenly only turned off my camera, leaving the call still active. Realizing I hadn't fully disconnected, my drowsy brain scrambled to properly end the call. Call's over. Hello? I'm done with the family call. You can come over now. Then, without noticing the computer screen, Bob started making a call to someone. He had said he was about to get ready for work, but now he's inviting someone over? Moreover, the way he spoke was quite friendly, giving me an uneasy feeling and making me hesitant to end it. It felt not just friendly, but there was a kind of sweetness as if he was speaking to a lover. What's going on? Noticing my reaction, my in-laws asked, curious. I thought he was heading to work, but it seems like he invited someone over. It's bothering me. I felt guilty about eavesdropping, even though he's my husband, but I told them I just wanted to check who was coming. Seeing Bob's behavior on the phone, it seemed like my mother-in-law felt the same way and agreed with me. So we decided to watch together.
Although I had a bad feeling, I reassured myself thinking, maybe he's just close with a coworker, and I'm overthinking this. However, a foreign woman walked into the house, chatting familiarly with Bob and even touching him. No matter the cultural differences between the US and other countries, you wouldn't just invite a woman into your home or be this intimate. I instinctively looked at my in-laws, and both had a grim expression. They murmured in disbelief, watching the video as if seeing something inexplicable. But just as I thought maybe I was overreacting and it was just cultural differences, the two clearly began to engage in infidelity.
Wait, what?
Seeing Bob's shocking behavior, I was more calm than angry and quickly pressed the record button. My in-laws had a mix of guilt towards me and anger towards Bob on their faces.
Catherine, are you okay?
You don't have to watch this if it's too hard, my mother-in-law said, concerned about me who was visibly shaking. Even in this situation, the care from my in-laws brought some comfort.
I need to see this for evidence.
I'm fine, I assured her and continued to watch. While I felt disgusted and angry about being cheated on, I was surprisingly calm. After the appalling act, the two began to talk on the bed. From their conversation, it was evident that the woman knew Bob was married, and it seemed to be a relationship limited to his time abroad.
Thanks for taking me on that trip the other time.
No problem.
Thanks to your guidance, I had a great time.
It turned out Bob had taken the woman on a trip recently. The destination was a place our kids had expressed interest in and we had talked about visiting as a family someday. And since they had no acquaintances abroad, they seemed to have enjoyed their trip without any inhibitions.
But you covered the expenses, right? Is the money okay?
The woman spoke worriedly about money, seeming nervous about her affair being discovered. Unbelievably, Bob had been telling me he earned less than he actually did, and he had confided in me that he had been spending the extra on his leisure. Apparently, his company has 2 payroll locations. With this shocking revelation, all of Bob's past actions started to seem suspicious. My trust in Bob seemed to shatter audibly. By the time I finished observing Bob's behavior, it was past 2 a.m. Stunned by the shocking truth, the 3 of us were speechless.
Let's get some sleep for now, and then think about what's next,
my father-in-law muttered, and we decided to head to our bedrooms. Once in bed, I was wide awake, unable to sleep. Bob had always been caring, proactive in work and childcare, and kind. We've known each other since high school, so I thought I understood him pretty well. I never thought that the Bob I knew was a lie, but with recent events, I felt I no longer knew him. I had always believed he'd never cheat, and if it were just eyewitness accounts or photos, I probably wouldn't have believed he was having an affair. But having seen the scene on a video call, I was in shock and my thoughts were frozen, but gradually various emotions towards Bob began to well up. I found myself wiping away tears that wouldn't stop flowing. Knowing I had to be up early, I tried to sleep, but my mind kept returning to Bob, and my drowsiness vanished. Before I knew it, it was morning, and I hadn't slept a wink. I used makeup to hide the redness around my eyes from crying, and started preparing for the day.
Good morning, breakfast is ready.
I called out cheerfully to my children, trying to act as usual.
Mom, are you okay? Your eyes are red. Are you all right?
I had tried to act strong in front of the kids, but they looked worried. I couldn't hide my bloodshot eyes and had caused them concern.
It's okay, honey. I just stayed up late last night, so I might be a bit tired. Oh, Mom! You gotta get proper sleep.
I replied with a smile, and the kids mimicked my tone, saying the same thing, and laughed, looking relieved. After seeing off the kids, I decided to take a break because my in-laws were concerned. Maybe because I had moved around to prepare for the kids' morning, this time I fell asleep instantly. I wished that the events of the night had just been a dream, and as I lay down, my consciousness faded instantly. I had planned to rest for a short while but ended up sleeping until the evening. My father-in-law had picked up the kids from kindergarten, and my mother-in-law had prepared dinner.
I'm so sorry for sleeping so much.
Thank you. I apologized as I immediately helped my mother-in-law and carried on as usual. When night fell and the kids were asleep, I spoke to my in-laws about my thoughts on the future.
I don't think I can live with Bob anymore. So, I'm considering getting a divorce.
At first, I was shocked and bewildered, but I couldn't see myself forgiving a husband like Bob, who could lie like that. I felt bad for my kind in-laws, but I couldn't imagine continuing my marriage with Bob.
We're truly sorry for what our son has done.
We're truly sorry. My in-laws seemed remorseful about Bob's actions and offered to help with the divorce proceedings. And Bob would be returning from abroad in a month, so I decided to quickly prepare everything by then. The next day, I immediately consulted with a lawyer known for handling infidelity and divorce cases. Also, Bob was quite active on social media, posting about his life abroad. He had been posting photos from overseas, and our kids enjoyed seeing them. I thought he might be careful about it, but since his partner seemed to be a foreigner, I thought there might be some clues on his social media. So I checked. After investigating, I found the woman he was seeing and hired a private investigator to identify her. Turns out, she worked at the same company as Bob and was a local employee there. So, I explained the situation to Bob's company and asked for their cooperation. Bob had always been a straight shooter, so they didn't believe it initially. However, after showing them the video evidence, they understood and offered their support. I also informed my brother and some close friends about the whole thing. Everyone was skeptical at first, but after showing them the video, they all sided with me.
That guy, even with a family, what was he thinking, betraying like that?
Especially my brother, who was close to Bob and trusted him with me, was quite furious. Though it was just a month's time, being a homemaker gave me the flexibility to prepare, and with the video evidence at hand, I managed to get everything ready for the divorce. With the support of my in-laws and by splitting up the necessary tasks, we managed to finish everything before Bob's return. However, explaining to the kids was a real challenge. They were attached to Bob and were eagerly waiting for his return. If I didn't tell them we won't see him anymore, even after the divorce, they might still want to live with him. But, considering their young age, I softly explained the situation with Bob and managed to convince them that we couldn't live with him any longer.
Your dad, you see, he told us a very bad lie. And I just can't forgive him. So we can't live with him anymore.
Really? Well, okay then. Since Bob had been away on work abroad before, they thought it was just another one of those times. They'll probably understand better as they grow. For now, they seem to accept the fact that they won't be living with Bob. Having finished all the preparations, I invited the newly returned Bob for a meal, saying it's been a while. I told him to meet at a private dining room in a restaurant. To Bob's surprise, not just me and the in-laws, but also some company executives and a lawyer were present in the room. By the way, my kids were with my brother, who feared he might hit Bob if he saw him. What's going on? Why are all these people here? In front of all these unexpected faces, Bob asked with a puzzled look. The lawyer began explaining about his infidelity and the divorce.
I haven't cheated. There must be some mistake.
Bob vehemently denied, acting like a victim. Even when confronted with photos of the other woman, he insisted they were just colleagues and she was simply helping him adjust to life abroad. My husband desperately tried to explain himself, and had I not known any better, I might have thought it was all a misunderstanding. Seeing Bob lie so effortlessly, a chill ran down my spine.
You still say the same after seeing this?
Losing patience, my father-in-law, trying to keep his anger in check, showed the video evidence. Bob, clearly agitated, started to panic.
How did you get this? I didn't think I was being filmed.
His employers then told him they couldn't trust him anymore and notified him of his termination. My in-laws were furious with Bob, my husband, and confronted him.
No, family is everything. Trust me, I'm not gonna get a divorce.
I looked at Bob coolly, wondering what he was trying to say now. We'll discuss the divorce in detail later. I calmly said that to a flustered Bob and left the room. That night, Bob, hoping to talk to me, came to the house where we had lived with my in-laws. However, my children and I had already moved out. Through connections from my father-in-law, we were introduced to a secure and comfortable property, and we had moved immediately. I didn't want to see Bob anymore, so I made a snap decision to move. I felt guilty about having to change schools and daycares for the kids, but they seemed fine with it, which was a relief. Bob came over and wanted to know where our new place was, but my in-laws firmly refused to tell him and gave him a piece of their mind. Bob apparently left after that. He kept sending persistent messages afterward, but I only responded about the divorce mediation and ignored the rest. He kept sending messages full of excuses. It was annoying, thinking if he didn't want this, he shouldn't have cheated in secret. Furthermore, my mother-in-law informed me that a neighbor had spotted Bob near the school and kindergarten. He was probably waiting outside to catch a glimpse of our kids and talk to me. Hearing this, I was relieved we had moved to a distant area. A few days later, at the divorce mediation, Bob had lawyered up well, and we finalized the divorce smoothly. I claimed a portion of our assets and gained custody of all 3 kids. It was also decided I would receive child support. Bob pleaded,
Please don't divorce me. I'll never cheat again. I've been good till now, right? Give me another chance. It was just a lapse in judgment.
But it was too late.
You enjoyed yourself abroad without me. I don't want to see your face anymore.
Bob tried to cling, but I had no trust left for him and brushed him off coldly. However, he insisted on seeing the kids periodically. I didn't want them to meet Bob, but he does have the right to see them post-divorce, and if the kids wanted to, I felt it would be cruel to stop them. So, we decided that whenever Bob meets the kids, my in-laws or my brother would be present. After the divorce, Bob, not giving up, asked friends to mediate, playing the victim. However, since I had explained the situation to them in advance, they refused him. If I hadn't informed them, they might have felt sorry for Bob, leading to further issues. I was truly glad I had informed those around me about everything. Bob was once seen as a diligent worker and a loving father. But now, everyone knew about his lies and infidelity. He had no allies. His friends distanced themselves, my in-laws kept their distance, and Bob became increasingly isolated. Currently, Bob has almost run out of savings, and he has child support to pay, so he's been working non-stop. Because his previous professional circle knows about his actions, he's taken a full-time job in a different field. He's also juggling multiple part-time jobs. In the beginning, he was excited to see the kids, but as they grew, they understood what he had done, and the meetings became less frequent. I'm not sure about his mistress since she's abroad, but I heard she received a warning from her employer. She's still overseas, so I hope at the very least she's learned her lesson about getting involved with a married man. Life after the divorce is comfortable with the asset division and child support. Considering my children's future, I started working again. It was tough on my own, but with my brother's help, I managed to raise them well. Currently, I live on my own in a town a bit away from the city, where it's not too inconvenient. Since I've shifted to remote work, I spend a lot of time at home. Now that my children have grown and moved out, I have more free time. I'm enjoying a relaxed life gardening. Occasionally, my children visit with my grandchildren. I look forward to treating them to meals I've prepared, savoring my peaceful retirement.